As the sun rose, Madame Millard smiled. Her niece returned with that smile with one of her own. Only a small handful knew about Kira's true identity, and just as the Master Mage had planned, the majority had accepted her as Daphne. The two were all but identical. Only those of the inner circle knew the truth. She applauded herself for following their mother's advice. Hide the one, let the other be the public face for both. Now the wisdom of those words had come to fruition. Daphne had been a skilled mage. Kira was better. Lounging in the Master Mage's tent, Kira idly stroked the skin of a fallen.
You should have seen his face.
She gloated.
It was like he'd seen a ghost, and ensuring his loyalty? A walk in moonlight. I almost felt sorry for him.
She laughed giddily. Madame Millard shook her head but smiled with pride. After all these years researching the darkest of spells, her lost niece had returned. She could allow a few indulgences.
Did you find a spell?
With an idle hand trailing along the fallen's rough hide, the younger mage sat up from her pillows.
Of course,
she purred.
But this will be more difficult than the ritual of obliteration. We're not seeking to destroy a soul, but to steal one,
she reminded.
And don't worry about the Mage Moon. It won't affect the ritual in the slightest.
The Master Mage impatiently brushed the reminder aside.
And you know for sure the Kaida is coming here?
It was beyond her wildest dreams for such to happen. Having the Keykeeper was one thing, but the Kaida as well? She could almost jump for joy. It was better than Christmas. Kira smiled at her overweight aunt.
My spies confirmed it. They saw her get off the train at Lofty Station. She only had a one-way ticket. She's here, somewhere. I'm sure it won't be long before she shows her face.
Madame Millard steepled her fingers together.
Excellent. Be sure you have everything prepared. We must not waste a moment. If she is as wise as her forebears, she will know the time grows short, one way or another.
The bleak scenery flashed by as Margo navigated the old truck along the path Walter had described. How the others planned on reaching their destination she didn't know. And at the moment she didn't care. The desert mirrored her thoughts, dry and weathered as old as the hills around them. Sitting in the passenger seat, Anwen stared out the window. She couldn't help but mull over her conversation with Daphne. What was the secret weapon she'd mentioned? Did it really exist, or was it a ploy to undermine her confidence? If so, it was working. Every now and again, Margo glanced over at her daughter, wondering what was going on in her head. It was hard to guess. The little one-sided conversation she'd overheard the night before was more telling. She had tried to contact Kern to ask his advice, but with no result. Perhaps it was too close to the time for him to respond, his soul rejoining his more physical form.
It's okay to be nervous,
Margo finally said, trying to console her child. Her distress washed over her like ocean waves. Anwen looked up from her musings. She absently looked away from the window to peer at her mother's face. The intrusion was not unwelcome. Her thoughts less than happy ones. Keeping her eyes on the fading path, Margo didn't notice the look of confusion on her daughter's face.
There's no shame in it,
she amended. Noting the gas gauge, she slowed the vehicle until they came to a stop.
Almost out of gas,
she explained.
We better go on foot from here.
I'll be fine,
Anwen said as she left the truck's cabin, closing the door behind her. She went around to claim her bag from the back, hefting the pack over one shoulder. She felt the Master Key's chain bite into the skin under her shirt. She'd almost forgotten its presence, having grown used to wearing it. Watching her, Margo felt something had changed.
Look at you,
she exclaimed as she joined her.
You're all grown up.
Moisture glistened in her eyes. Anwen rolled her eyes.
Really, Mom? Can we not do this right now?
She pulled away from the hands her mother had placed on her shoulders. Margo sniffled a little.
I know.
She gave her daughter a quick hug before pulling away.
It's just that you've grown so much over the past few weeks.
Shaking her head, Anwen strode down the path, taking up the lead. Tyler looked out across Lake Wyvern from atop the sacred grove. The highway swept past the path leading to the ruined city and the gates. And beyond even that, Anwen and her mother journeyed towards the far side. He could almost imagine where they were now. Chances were good they were halfway across the small expanse of desert, if he'd calculated correctly. Turning back towards the grove, he knew the presence of Kaida Magus. Her body was just as translucent as before. Despite this, she somehow seemed more present than in previous encounters. For the briefest of moments, he glanced towards the direction of their camp. Part of him wondered what the other two were doing.
We meet again, Damon,
Kaida said, as she walked out from among the trees. Her footsteps made no mark on the ground, nor did her passage make any sound.
Perhaps for the last time. I take it you did not impart our last conversation to any others?
The dragon shook his head.
It is mine to bear,
He answered as he sat on a convenient stone.
let the others worry about what they know.
Kaida shook her head.
As self-sacrificing as ever, I see.
Her long skirts swirled around her as a gentle breeze combed through the trees.
You may indeed be one of the council, second only to the Nurim. But even you have limitations. Nor are the others so weak in their mortality. You could do worse to trust them.
Tyler pulled at the grass. He plucked a handful or two, only to send the fragments scattering in the breeze.
Old habits die hard.
He replied. The wind teased his hair and clothes, causing the fabric to ripple like the quiet surface of a pond. The woman knelt down on one knee to look him in the eyes. For all his relative height, she overshadowed him when he sat.
Then, perhaps you are more blinded by it. The others know their limitations. They have yet to realize their true strengths. I fear the same fault lies in you. Remember, you are not alone.
The breeze picked up, scattering leaves in the air, making it necessary for Tyler to cover his eyes. When he looked up, Kaida was gone. He expected no less from the first mage. Childlike laughter filled the air as the wind peaked again, then subsided.
Love you, Daddy.
Tyler started at the young voice. Sure, he'd heard it before, but before he could remember from where, the ground rumbled underneath him. With wide eyes, he put one hand to the stone. Tomorrow, the earth said.
Tomorrow.
He replied.